Welcome to PodCask original series, The Blend, perfect for golf and whiskey enthusiasts alike. This is episode 7, Steady Legs and a Smooth Stroke, hosted by Brian Bailey. Hey there, Blend fans. This is Brian Bailey here with PodCask, and I just want to welcome you to our new episode, episode 7, called Steady Legs and a Smooth Stroke. Yes, look, if you're watching this on video, this is a completely different format. Well, the Blend format has completely changed. I've been reaching out to a lot of listeners as well as PodCask members and kind of balancing the structure of what this podcast will become. And here is our new iteration of Whiskey Made Me Say It. It's still going to happen. We're going to release that once or twice a month. Just fun interviews that we're doing with interesting people inside the golf world, inside of the whiskey world. But the Blend is kind of coming in into its own. So when I first started all this podcast stuff, it was really whiskey heavy because most of my friends were really good golfers. Most of them were newer in the whiskey world. So the whiskey side was where we spent most of our time, and that's where most of the information came from. What's happened now is we are starting to bring in more and more whiskey fans inside of PodCask that are not nearly up to par with their whiskey skills with golf. So we're going to expand the golf section, which is a home run for me. I've been coaching golf. If you don't know me, I've been coaching golf for nearly 30 years, almost 20 of it collegiately. I've owned a golf data company here for the last few years, so I understand performance. I understand what it takes and the skills necessary to achieve at a high level. So what you're going to start to see is there's going to be more and more golf introduced. So basically what we've done is I've kind of created a passion, a merge of whiskey and golf together. So the introduction will be just this, me kind of talking about what we're going to talk about today, things inside of PodCask that are happening, and then we're going to break into kind of some main topics. The main topics will be whiskey pour, where we're going to pour some knowledge into you. This week we're going to talk about legs. What are legs? If you watch my blind tasting, the number one question I got from everybody is, how could you look at your glass of whiskey and predict actual proof by legs? Well, we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about, I'll also do a blind tasting again, and we'll highlight legs as well. Again, getting people up to speed on blind tasting. On the golf side, we're going to talk about your legs as well. We're going to talk about setup inside the putting stroke, how important the legs are, and how we can avoid motions such as sway, such as rotation, and orientation issues that can really prevent you from making a lot of putts. So the setup with your lower body can play a key role into your ability to deliver the putter to the ball. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to give you some drills and some ways to be able to identify if you have any of these issues inside your putting stroke and fix them. So again, what we're going to start to see is we're going to pour knowledge inside of golf and whiskey, and then we're going to give you something tangible to take and go try, right? So that is kind of our goal inside the podcast now. It's going to be much more defined, much cleaner than kind of the hodgepodge mess that we did in the past. And then we're going to close out every show with a recap and a toast. I think as a whiskey enthusiast, you should be a great toaster. So people are going to look at you and say, give us a toast. I want to give you some great toast. Now the toast could be about what we talked about inside the episode, or it could be just a random toast. But again, I want you thinking that way. So when you are in a group and somebody hits you with, hey, what's your favorite toast, or create a toast for what's happening today, I want you to feel comfortable enough and have enough toast knowledge to be able to throw that out. So without further ado, let's talk about what's going on inside the world. First, I have to say thank you. We've reached more than 20,000 people from our socials and golfcast.com. So in the last month, so 20,000 people have partaken in our videos, our socials, and things like that. Thank you for all of you that share, like, and send that information out. Again, keep doing that. We're really looking forward to keep growing our brand and make this bigger and better. So we need to do that. So if you are not a fan of our socials, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, X, make sure you go sign up for that. If you are, thank you again, and keep pushing that out. As well as we need more people in the system. Golfcast.com. Make sure that you drive people into the system. That is really, really important. Complete your foursome is kind of our big goal right now. If you're already in the system, can you invite 3 friends in for free? We want to grow that number because we have really cool stuff going on right now, building-wise, to get you better at whiskey and golf. We also created a new game or challenge. You probably heard it this Sunday inside of our podcast called the 100 Challenge. We went to J.H. Bard's in Blacksburg, Virginia. My nephew joined me, and we actually met Jason Hardy, one of the co-owners, and we put him through the task of 100 of creating a pour and a whiskey. And we have a great scoring system that we're going to use all around the world to compare distilleries and pubs and give you a good sense of how the cocktails, how their pours are, and how well trained the bartender is to get what you like. So that was really cool. Other than that, we're going to jump into our episode today. Also, before we get started, I forgot to mention we have a new AI assistant inside of PodCask. We're going to call it Miles, right? For Master of Insights of Links and Spirits. Miles. So Miles is going to give us a lot of technical information, a lot of science behind the fact of how whiskey and golf is so spectacular. So be on the lookout for our AI assistant dropping knowledge throughout this episode and throughout the rest of this season and for years to come. This is a fun little game I'm starting to do with some of our data science guys. So Miles will be our new co-presenter at times as we're working our way through the messaging. So without further ado, let's dive in here and learn more about legs. Time to pour some knowledge into our whiskey experience. All right, PodCast Nation, this is Brian Bailey here bringing you the legs section. So I've already made our pour. I went ahead and poured the rest of our Jimmy Red bourbon. I really enjoyed it through our blind tasting. You'll learn more about that later in the episode. But what we've done is we take the glass here, we can swirl it, or you can tilt it and roll it. And what happens is we coat the glass. There's some surface tension pieces, and there's also some evaporation pieces that allow legs to form. So what you can start to see are the legs actually show up on the glass here, and you'll see them dripping down the sides. So what is that, and what do we learn from that? So what I know from legs is when they are fast and thin, tends to be proof is low. When they are wide and slow, proof tends to be high. Now there's some outliers to that. Sugar added to the system, you could have coloring added to the system, all of that can slow it down. But what we can really learn from this is we can kind of understand age and we can understand proof by the visual and how the legs actually run. Again, things that are in the barrel longer, a lot of times have more complexity, and therefore the legs can be wider, and hopefully if it's a barrel cask or a cask strength whiskey, the proof is going to be higher, they'll be slower there as well. Again, this one was in the 90s, so kind of a moderate whiskey, but again, overall, that's what legs are. Hey Miles, can you give us a quick tutorial or good information scientifically about what legs are and where they come from?
To understand the science behind whiskey legs, we need to look at a few key factors: surface tension, evaporation, and alcohol content. Surface tension. When you swirl whiskey in a glass, the liquid climbs up the sides due to surface tension. Surface tension is the force that makes the surface of a liquid act like a stretched elastic sheet. It's caused by the attraction between the molecules in the liquid. Evaporation. Once the whiskey climbs up the sides of the glass, the alcohol begins to evaporate. Alcohol has a lower boiling point than water, so it evaporates more quickly. As the alcohol evaporates, it leaves behind a higher concentration of water and other components, like sugars and oils, which are more viscous. Alcohol content. The formation and behavior of legs are closely related to the alcohol content of the whiskey. Higher alcohol content generally results in more pronounced legs. As the alcohol evaporates from the liquid on the glass's surface, the remaining liquid becomes heavier and more viscous, forming the streaks we see as legs. Marangoni effect. Another scientific phenomenon at play here is the Marangoni effect, which describes the flow of liquid caused by a gradient in surface tension. In our case, the gradient is created by the difference in evaporation rates between alcohol and water. This effect helps pull the remaining liquid into droplets that form legs. By observing the legs, you can infer certain qualities about the whiskey. For example, thicker legs that move slowly down the glass often indicate a higher viscosity, which can be due to higher alcohol content or the presence of more sugars and oils. Thinner legs that move quickly might suggest a lighter, less viscous whiskey.
Well, thank you, Miles. I would have never been able to say all that. But to me, I think the exciting part is if you understand legs, especially if you're into blind tasting. Blind tasting, you're really going to start to show up in the dangerous and enthusiast level, where we're able to really separate which whiskeys are which by nose, by taste, and also by sight. So I think understanding legs is just another tool for you to expand your enthusiasm. It's just another tool that you can expand your enthusiasm towards whiskey. Again, I think understanding legs gives you a one-up on the majority of people inside of your blind Understanding legs gives you a leg up on your blind tasting groups. And again, when they look for you for information, you drop some information on legs and how you can predict proof, age, and different criteria just by watching the whiskey roll down the glass. You will become a superstar, a hero inside of your tasting group. So here's to legs, here's to whiskey. Life is good, and cheers, my friends. Now let's dive over here and watch our actual blind tasting here of Highline Distillery Jimmy Red Straight Bourbon. Really good stuff. Cheers, and thank you again.
Welcome to the Blind Whiskey Tasting with your GolfCast personalities. Hopefully we won't humiliate ourselves.
Hey there, GolfCast Nation. This is Brian Bailey here with another blind tasting. Again, we're going to go with number 22. No clue. It's exciting stuff, so let's dive in here and pour. Again, I like just to pour a little bit in for tasting. I like to come back and taste it again later, right? Because maybe my taste buds are different. We'll do our normal ranking, 1 to 5. So before the pour, what can we learn? Color. It's kind of a dark amber, right? Good, good, good. So it's telling us if it's an American whiskey, it's probably older than 3 or 4 years. Probably pushing 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that ballpark. If it's Irish, we would double that. Woo! From the nose, man, I am getting corn. I'm getting bourbon. So right now I'm thinking bourbon. I'm thinking probably 4 to 7. Legs wise, let's see. Can we see our legs? Our legs are fairly slow, a little wide, a little slow. So definitely I'm thinking we're outside of the 80s. Could be 90s, could be 100s. But before the pour, I'm thinking corn. So therefore I'm thinking American. I'm thinking proof somewhere in the 80s, probably higher than 80s, 90s or 100. And I think it's a bourbon or a corn whiskey of some sort. So let's dive in here. So before the pour, that would be our guests. Let's dive in here and see what we learn. I would say this is definitely a high rye bourbon. Sweet vanilla, finished with some spice. On my first sip, we'll go again. No real ethanol burn, maybe just a hint way in the back. The sweetness and the spiciness of the rye, I'm assuming rye, really good. So after the taste, what am I getting? I'm getting vanilla, I'm getting sugar, I'm getting sweet, confirms bourbon, I'm thinking high rye bourbon, I'm thinking American, I'm thinking proof, little burn in the background, I'm thinking 90s maybe, and then grain type again would be corn because it is a bourbon. So that would be my guess for this whiskey. So let's dive in here and look at our book and see what the actual book says. This is number 22. This is called High Wire Distilling, Jimmy Red Straight Bourbon. So boom, got the corn, got American. Proof 47.5, so that'd be 93. So I got it. I said probably 90s or 100, and I kind of settled on 90s because it wasn't, the background was a burn, and I went high rye. They don't give us that information, so let me dive in here and actually look up the company. This bourbon is made from 100%. All right, so here's what we've learned about the Jimmy Red Straight Bourbon. This comes from Jimmy Red corn, which is a magenta-hued grain grown for decades on the James Island near South Carolina, or Charleston, South Carolina. This is aged 2 years in char, 3.5 American oak barrels. This bourbon is best enjoyed with proper whiskey. So I was saying 4 or 5. They're telling me 2 years. So my age was wrong. Pretty dark amber for a 2-year whiskey. So again, I got 3 out of 4, which is pretty good. I got the grain, I got the proof, I got the region, American, And but I miss the aging part. Sugar front end, lots of spice, even a hint of mint. Finish is nice. A little bit of dry mouth, kind of sits around in your mouth for a little bit. Definitely gets kind of a sweet finish. Not a lot of layers to the finish, but it is medium long and it is pretty tasty. I actually really enjoy this whiskey. To me, it almost tastes like a finished whiskey, and it must be the grain. But again, to me, I'm a big fan of this. So, ranking system 1 to 5, I would rank this 3.5. I really enjoy, especially for a 2-year young bourbon. This is pretty good for a young crafting company. So, tip of the cap there. I'm going to call this a 3.5 for Jimmy Red. Lots of sweet, lots of spice. I love that. A good solid length finish with some sweetness. Just a slight of hug as it's going down. Good whiskey. Thank you so much. So again, this was a blind tasting recap. Nailed the region. I nailed the grain. I nailed the proof. I totally whiffed on the actual age limit or age statement. But again, this is pretty amber for a 2-year whiskey. So 3 out of 4 is not bad. Again, rank this 3.5. Thank you so much, and we'll bring you some more blind tastings in the future. Life is good. That's a good whiskey. I might have to investigate on that one.
The skills and concepts to elevate your golf.
Hey there, GolfCast Nation. This is Brian Bailey here, bringing you a new episode inside the blend. We're talking about legs. We're talking about a smooth stroke. So we're going to talk about lower body inside the putting motion. How is the lower body different in the putting motion compared to the full swing, right? Full swing, we're starting to get rotational values and things like that. Putting stroke inside of 30 feet, we really want to try to lock this down as best as possible. We don't want a lot of moves. So we can have sways where we could sway off the ball. We could have a sway towards and away. So a lot of times I see people will sway and push the club out. Some people will sway and pull the club in, migrating weight to their toes and their heels. Like I said, we can get sway here. We can have rotational pieces, right? We don't want a lot of rotation inside of our putting, and we can get up and down movements, side tilts, ups and downs, and start to change our height. Ideally, the best players in the world, you see, they're very static, they're very still, and they basically, not a whole lot going on. Now, with 6 degrees of freedom and a lot of studies, the hip, all those pieces are moving minutely. There is some movement, but nothing by the naked eye or big turns. So, hey, Miles.
How can I help you, Brian?
I was wondering, can you explain 6 degrees of freedom to everybody, especially when it comes to the lower body?
In golf, particularly during the putting motion, the lower body plays a crucial role in stabilizing and controlling the putter. Applying the principles of 6 degrees of freedom to the lower body helps in understanding how subtle movements and rotations contribute to an effective putting stroke. Sway, translational movements. X-axis, surge minimal forward-backward movement of the lower body is essential to maintain stability and prevent swaying that can disrupt the putting stroke. Y-axis, side-to-side movement should be minimized to keep the body centered over the ball, ensuring a consistent stroke path. Z-axis, heave up-down movements should be controlled to maintain a steady posture, avoiding any bobbing that can affect the putter's contact with the ball. Rotational movements. Pitch, rotation around the x-axis, the forward tilt of the hips helps to set the proper posture. But excessive tilting should be avoided to prevent changes in the stroke plane. Yaw, rotation around the z-axis, slight rotational movement of the hips can assist in aligning the stroke path, but the motion should be minimal and controlled to avoid pulling or pushing the putt. Roll, rotation around the y-axis, rotational stability of the hips ensures that the shoulders and arms can swing the putter freely, promoting a smooth and consistent stroke. Orientation of the lower body is critical, as maintaining a stable and balanced stance allows the upper body to execute the putting stroke with precision. By minimizing unnecessary movements and controlling rotational dynamics, golfers can achieve better accuracy and consistency in their putting performance.
Thank you, Miles. That was helpful. So let's dive in here and go layman's talk, right? So what a lot of the pieces we see when people miss putts is when we talk sway, a lot of times I see players will actually allow their weight to migrate towards their toes. So as they start to take the putter back, they'll actually send their weight out there. Really hard to putt that way. Vice versa. A lot of times you will see putter coming back. They want the ball to come inside. They will actually pull inside. Yet another bad way to putt. So ideally we want the lower body not to migrate at all and send it in the hole, right? We also have rotational issues, right? We can go rotation this way, big rotations. It could even be slight, subtle, but any rotation of the hips can change our path. Path can bend the putt either direction. So again, inside of 30 feet, we should be pretty rock steady and be able to hit lots of putts in the hole without our lower body moving. We get outside of 30 feet, we might actually start adding some hip rotation, but again, not very often. The other one would be big movements up and down. Like we don't want to do this. We don't want a lot of side tilting side tilting either direction, right? We want, again, our head, we want to stack ankles, knees, hips, kind of shoulders, head, stack everything, and it remains very steady. If we're able to do that, we're able to actually produce a pretty good stroke, or at least have the ability to create a good stroke. The other piece is orientation that he talked about is in setup, right? So if I set up for this putt and I open my hips this way, the path is going to want to go left, right? I've created a pathway to move left, and vice versa, right? If I have the same putt, now my orientation's right, now it's easier for me, the hip's in the way, to kind of push out, kind of like full swing. So when that lead hip is in the way or out of the way, it'll help pull the club in a certain direction. So ideally, if we're going for neutral, we want that hip to be pretty straight and our orientation to be straight. So if we do all this right, no sways, no rotations, good orientation. Zero orientation, flatten everything out. No lower body motion, no rotations, no sway. We should make lots of putts. So I hope this was helpful to start to understand what the lower body is doing inside the putting motion. Ideally, we want to limit rotation and sways. Orientations, we want relatively neutral. Depending, some people aim a little right, little left. Jack Nicklaus opened up. There are some putters that are a little closed. That's okay. But again, we need to design a system for you to make more putts, but we have to understand what we're looking for. So in our game section, I'm going to show you a couple cool drills to work on stability, to help fight the sways, to help fight rotations, and of course, make more putts. So, hey, be on the watch out for that. And again, thank you, Miles.
You're welcome, GolfCask Nation.
I love it.
Let's elevate our skills with golf games.
All right, GolfCast Nation, we're going to do a fun drill here. This is probably, I think, one of the coolest drills I do to teach stability, right? I used to teach where you put a towel under the arch of your feet, and then that would be for sway. But what I found is most people don't have a towel or don't want to use a towel. So what I like to do is call toes up, heels up, right? So again, when we want to work on stability, we want to keep the weight in the middle of our feet, right? We don't want to get our weight out towards our toes or moving that way or moving towards our heel. So what I like to do with a player that's trying to learn stability is when they set up, take their toes and lift them in the air. And then as their toes are in the air, lift their heels up slightly. And then that should get you somewhere in the midfoot. And once we kind of find that midfoot, now we just want to kind of maintain that feel, right? So again, I'm here at 8 feet. Should make roughly 50% of my putts. Giving you a caveat if I do miss. So I'm going to lift my toes up, heels up, keep the toes and the heels up. Now I'm in a good secure place. And now let's just make a good stroke. I've actually played rounds of golf where my toes have been up because I do tend to migrate to my toes. A lot of times in setup, I get too much weight out of my toes. So to me, toes up is a big, big piece to help you putt better. All right, we just talked about sway. No sway in putting, at least we hope not. So what we're going to talk about now is orientation. Where are we aligning our body? And also rotations, right? So inside of putting, this is a really cool piece, especially for golf coaches. Rotation or joints. Path is actually alignments. So orientation, where we set our hips, where we set our body, will help us create path. And then again, if we have a rotation piece, that will be around a joint, right? And we'll talk more about that in future videos. But what we're going to talk about first is orientation. Where are we pointing? That is a big piece. So what I want to do is I'm going to lay down a rod here pointing at the center of the cup, and then I'm going to run a secondary one parallel to inside of that. All right. So now when I step over here, I know my rod is roughly parallel to my target, because I see so many people, you don't even know where those putts, where they actually point these rods. So that's a good hack to be able to make sure that we're aligning our rods correctly. Now we're going to talk about orientation first. Where are we going to set everything up? So what we're going to do simply is take another alignment rod and run it through our belt loops. And this will give us a good idea of where our hip is pointing. Most golfers, we tend to try to get them in a neutral space. It's a really good way to putt. For me, I'm always slightly open. It's just the way I've always putted. That's what I've always done. It's very hard for me to go to neutral, but we'll do neutral for today. And again, I try to get most of my athletes as close to neutral as possible, but what we've got to be able to do is put you in a position where you make more putts. That's our sole purpose, right? So we've got to find what orientation is right for you. But again, so what we can do is make sure that our knees, hips, shoulders, especially lower body wise, is running parallel to our target line. Ooh, this is hard for me. I'm uncomfortable. But now we're just going to rotate back and through and deliver the ball in the hole. Like I said, orientation is where the path wants to go. So if I do open up, what I'm going to see is the club's probably going to go out because my right hip is in the way on the way back, and it's going to want to come left because my left hip is cleared out of the way, kind of like a full swing, right? If this hip's out of the way, I can bring that path inside. So if I do set up an orientation a little bit this way, you can see my path is out and across. Now that was extreme. And then we'll go the opposite direction, where now our path is this way. And you can see it wants to push out slightly. So your orientation is the path of the putt. That is, you know, in the big scheme of it all, it's not nearly as important as the face. The ball goes where the face is. But that orientation is something you want to pay attention to because it is a skill. If my goal is to set up perfectly square, neutral, then I need to practice that skill. If my skill is to be a couple degrees open or closed, I need to practice that and know what that feels like. This will also show you if there's rotations in a putting stroke. I've actually seen tour players that had a little bit of rotations kind of slide into their putting stroke. So what you might see in something like this would be something like this. Nothing crazy, but again, you can start to see a little bit of lower body action. Again, the shorter the putt, the less the lower body should want to work. So again, we don't want to see a lot of rotations and tilts. Can you putt that way? Yes, but you're just adding complexity, right? So as my hips are rotating, now that is in three-dimensional space, putter, arms, everything is being thrown around. So it can be very challenging to be reproducible and just to be a good putter from that position. The best players in the world don't do it. There's probably a reason, right? So that would be kind of the rotation piece. So the beauty of the lower body inside of putting is it should be pretty neutral. We shouldn't have a ton of motion going on with our lower body. But again, we've got to pay attention to orientation. If there's any sway values, heel to toe, if there's any rotational values, and then from that, how can we get out of that, right? So how can I get out of a rotational piece? Well, orientation piece we showed you, you just train it. To get out of a rotational piece, so what I like to do, and I like to do this in the bunker a lot too, is when the player sets up, I want them to feel that their knees kick out over their ankles, right? They call it kind of the bear squat. So if you do that and you create that motion, it's really, really hard to create rotation with your lower body. So what are our three hacks? I guess lack of a better term. We want to go heel toe to get rid of sway. We want to go orientation, make sure we set up correctly. And then again, if we do have rotations, just a bear squat, once we take our normal thing, just kick our knees out over our ankles and run the putt that way. Again, all easy ways to kind of cope with what's happening, but our lower body can play a huge role in making, and I hate to say it, missing lots of putts. Hope this was helpful, and I wish you the best out on the putting green.
Time for closing thoughts and a toast.
So it's time to wrap up episode 7, Steady Legs and a Smooth Stroke. What we've talked about today is how important legs are in helping identify characteristics of your whiskey. You can also see how much sugar's in the system, how much oil's in the system, viscosity's in the system. You can even start to predict proof. So with these legs, or sometimes called tiers, gives you a good sense of characteristic about the whiskey before you ever taste it. And again, that's what we're trying to do. Just like in golf, we are trying to see all the pieces that are in front of us and make the best decision we can on our shot, as well as our, shot of whiskey. What else? Some other exciting pieces. Again, I was really blown away by my blind tasting today. What was it? It was High Wire Distilling Jimmy Red Straight Bourbon. Good stuff. I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for that. And again, here is the rest of my pour of that. A really, really good whiskey. As for understanding lower body inside of the putting, we do not want sway forward or backward. We don't want rotations, especially inside of 30, 40 feet. We should be able to generate enough power with disassociation of our upper body and lower body. So again, we don't want a lot of lower body action going, because that will only bend the path and create lots of issues on start line, distance control, etc. So again, our ability to really neutralize the lower body, have no falling forward or backward, left or right, or too much rotation, and also setting the system up relatively neutral, or at least setting the system up in a system that helps us make more putts would probably be a better way of saying that. It might be neutral, it might be a little left, a little right, it doesn't matter. But whatever that system is, we have to have that skill to be able to understand what that is, put our body in that situation so we can make more putts. I hope the segments on that was very helpful. So let's go ahead and end here with a toast. So let's raise our glass to the perfect blend of craft and control. Just as you master the power of the lower body in influencing putts, we savor the strength of each leg in our whiskey. Here's to the precision on the greens and the perfection in the glass. May our putts be smooth, our spirits high. Cheers to golf and whiskey. Golf Cask. I am a fan. 2 years old. It's pretty good, pretty good. Miles, you have anything you want to end the show with?
As we wrap up, remember, whether you're lining up that crucial putt or savoring a fine whiskey, it all comes down to steady legs and a smooth stroke. Cheers to perfecting your game on the green and in the glass.
Sounds good. Again, I appreciate it, and I look forward to bringing you next episode 8 in about 7 days. Thank you, and cheers.